So I thought I'd start this project off by talking about S4HANA security and what you can do as an ECC customer to prepare for S4HANA. So this is still a very relevant question. S4HANA was released in 2015, and so it's 9 years old now. This is 2024. So it's almost a decade old, but most customers haven't migrated, right? And you can see here, this is Gartner stat from, actually it's a little out of date, but a little more than 60% of SAP ERP customers haven't made the jump. So if you're still on ECC and you're still waiting to make that jump to S4, you are not alone. You are in the majority. Most customers are in the same boat that your organization is in. But that's what I wanted to address with this series: is what can you do as an ECC security admin to prepare for that? And the answer is there's a lot you can do to prepare for that. So this is what I want to cover as part of this series. So I wanted to talk about the RISE licensing concept. This will impact a lot of customers that are moving to S4HANA, and I'll explain why. The impact of existing role designs. So if you're in ECC and running task-based single roles or enablers or drives, what's the impact going to be for S4HANA? We'll spend some time talking about that, and then also what everyone thinks of when they talk about going to S4HANA is planning for Fiori. What does Fiori security look like? And there's probably a lot out there, but we'll still spend some time talking about Fiori security and what that looks like. But today we're going to be talking about licensing, and it's important, and I'll explain why it's important here in a slide or two. But just know that for RISE, it's based on what you have and not what you actually use. If you're going to stay on premise and not use RISE, your old licensing model applies. So when you signed your BOM, your initial agreement with SAP, those license classifications will still take effect. If you're moving to RISE, like I said, I think a lot of customers will, then it's based on what you have, not on what you use. And the analogy that SAP likes to use is, you can give grandma the keys to the Ferrari and she'll drive it around all day, 10, 15 kilometers under the speed limit, right? But she's still got a Ferrari, right? So in this case, maybe we should get grandma a Toyota Corolla or something like that. So if you, as an SAP shop, grant your access to users on a demonstrated business need to have basis, you'll be in good shape for the most part. You'll find, I think, hey, I'm ready for this, right? I'm ready for licensing, at least from a licensing perspective. But if you live down in this red arrow, right, then that's a problem. And you're going to be finding that you've given the keys to the Ferrari to a lot more people than probably need it. So let's go ahead and, jump to the details on what RISE licensing looks like. So RISE, and let me explain to you why it's important first. So RISE, you saw on the slide before, ECC support's been extended through 2027 and extended support through 2029 or 2030. I forget which offhand. And that's only for people running the most recent version of ECC, right? If you're running an older version, then you're out of support. SAP will typically come to you and say, hey, we'll support you, right? Welcome back, come back into the fold. We'll support you on RISE. Your current version, you'll be able to incidents, what have you. The caveat is you're going to have to make a commitment to upgrade by a certain date. But it provides an on-ramp for a lot of existing ECC customers. It's a little smoother path to get there between now and 2030, maybe even a little after that, right? So I think a lot of ECC customers are going to find themselves using this licensing model. And basically, it tells three types of classifications users, three license classification types. So your advanced user is going to be equivalent to one full user equivalent in the RISE model. Full user equivalent and advanced, a professional user. If you have professional licenses today, those are equivalent, right? It's that cost plus the hardware hosting cost, essentially. So any power user that's using SAP to its fullest capability is an advanced user. Core user is using a subset of that functionality, and there's a license, there's definitions on what those users can do, or if they're a core user, and we'll kind of cover some examples here in a few slides. And then you have self-service users. Self-service users would be the lowest classification. You can see here, you can see here that one FUE equals 5 core users. So if you can get an advanced user down to a core user, that's 80% savings, 80% cost reduction. If you can get them down to a self-service user, well, one FUE is equal to 30 self-service user licenses, right? So that's you can get them from advanced to self-service. It's a 97% reduction in cost. So security really plays a big role in how much licensing exposure you have on the RISE licensing model. And here's some examples, right, of what those are. Self-service users do things like enter timesheets, enter purchase recs, production execution. So if you're doing manufacturing and you got someone out on the floor who's actually, executing production runs, that's self-service. Now, note that in the core side of things, there's a little more advanced uses of that. So if we look at production execution, production planning is there in that left column. It's considered core functionality. So if you've got a bunch of people out on the manufacturing floor that can do production planning, that's something to revisit maybe, right? Because supervisors and managers and production planners are the ones that should be doing production planning, and people on the line, maybe we'll take that away and just let them do the production execution activities. So hopefully this gives you kind of a flavor for the types of activities that these users can do. I will say, let me jump back, the self-service users, that's a complete list. That core list, that's a subset. There's a little over 40 currently activities that are mapped as core processes right now. So going back to what can I do about this question? Well, the first thing you can do is actually take your own measurements on your roles. You can do that today. You can measure your own users. You can see you can ask yourself the question, what if I were to migrate today? What would I have to, what would my license exposure be? So 2 notes out there that are relevant. Depends on the scenario. The first one, 313382, is for newer systems. And I'll go ahead and put links to these so you don't have to remember them. But 330840 is for the older ones, right? So if you're running an older version of NetWeaver 7071, that's the note you'd implement. And both of these install this report, Slim Users CLF Help, and you would execute that report in order to get your license measurements. We'll look at that here right now. So you can see, let me make one more point. It says here that I just noticed this FUE projection for that first note it's on version 1.61. Right now it's on 1.74. So this note is updated fairly frequently. So it might be worth reinstalling it if you haven't re-implementing it, if you haven't run it in a while, or if you installed it a while ago. So when you run the report, this is what it looks like. You can see a couple things here. One is towards the bottom, the additional parameters. You can use the local rule set. You can also upload your own validation rules. And these notes the first note comes with an downloadable Excel spreadsheet with all the rules, and we'll look at that too. In this case, though, I'm just using the local rule set. I'm going to run it against my production rules. And this is just an example. You can see I've got a kind of in the target classification, these are the actual license classifications that if a user has this role, they're going to be an advanced user. And kind of looking at problem roles here, I think the one that jumps out to me is the one with the red arrow. This is the access role that you give your base users. Like if you're going to be an SAP user, this is the bare minimum of access you need, right? I need to be able to print. I need to be able to do basic security diagnostics like SU53s. This role is an advanced role. That's kind of weird, right? So if we look at this ratio column, it tells us, well, look at the objects column. There's 250 authorization objects in this role. Out of those, in that ratio column, there's 30 that are relevant to this license classification tool. So 30 of those are showing up as being FUE, license relevant authorizations. And one of those is causing the problem. So if we double click on this report, on that line in the report, excuse me, you can see the authorization objects on the left that are being checked. I got this sorted by target classification. You can see the one that's causing us a problem is FBKPF Beck. Now, if you know me personally, you know I hate asterisks and roles, and that's its own problem. But in this particular case, it's one of these activities in this authorization object that's causing the problem. So I mentioned you have that Excel spreadsheet that you can download from the notes. This is what that looks like. Here's the rule set. You can see, the rule description. I'll explain what those. There's a lot of different license classifications in this spreadsheet, but we'll get into what that are on the next slide. What those are on the next slide. Excuse me. So this is it. You can see I've got all three of them represented here. I'm filtering on that problem object, BKPF Beck. In this, when you're reading this report, HP Professional is going to be considered advanced, so professional user is an advanced user. Functional user, limited professional, if you have those, is going to be considered a core user, and then an HD Productivity is the self-service, right? So they don't have the core advanced self-service classifications here. They have them mapped to the old license types. And the problem in this particular case with this role is that delete access. So I see in the auth value, I have activity type 6, which is delete, right? So if I were to take away delete, I would automatically clear this problem up. And let's just face it, not everyone in the organization should be able to delete sales docs. Sales docs, financial documents. So in this particular case, probably makes sense to even take away create and change from this role and just give all the users access to view them. And that would automatically clean this problem up. We bump this license classification of this role from advanced all the way down to, this authorization object, we could take it all the way down to self-service. But I guess the point here is when you do this, if you assign this to all your users, whole swaths of users that aren't using other advanced functionality should drop to that lower license classification. So this is an example of something easy that you can do to help limit your licensing exposure in the new RISE licensing model. And that's all for this time. Have a good day.